اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وانت خير الراحمين. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين، اللهم اشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين، اللهم اشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين وارحم موتانا وموتى المسلمين. اللهم انصر الاسلام واعز المسلمين وعلو برحمتك كلمة الحق والدين. واخر دعوانا ان الحمد لله رب العالمين. So anyone here from Morocco? Hey, it was a great game. This was like a ton of drama, like you know, for an African Cup. So yes. For people that don't know what I'm talking about, the African Cup of Nations was on the weekend, and the finals between Morocco and Senegal. And all I can say is, you know, I said this at another masjid a couple of days ago. The amount of Muslims that were making sujood during that whole contest was amazing. I loved it from all teams. But well played. No one here is from Senegal, right? So okay, just to make sure we congratulate the Senegalese brothers. So today I was actually going to do a tafsir of part of the surah of the Quran, and I decided not to. So I'm going to make this all about action, and I actually decided to plug in a part of history that we don't always talk about as Muslims. So the topic is Khalid ibn Walid. We're not going to cover everything about Khalid ibn Walid, but that's what Brother Ali is drawing just an immaculate job of, is some of the maps, some of the battles that I want to talk about. That's a map that he's putting together right there. But I just want to start with how history is taught in the West. So has anyone here studied history at an actual university level, or taken online courses, like an actual curriculum that gets you to be, you know, a historian or a professor of history? Generally what's done, this by the way happened, so I tried this in Australia. I'm an engineer, so I studied engineering, but we had to take electives because engineers are very narrow-minded individuals that don't know anything about anything else. So I took, you know, history and economics and things like that. But they teach history in a way that says, you know, you get about 2 weeks of Mesopotamian and Egyptian history, like the ancient history of the past, right? Like 5,000 years ago. We're talking like Pharaoh and Musa type of times, right? And then what they do is they cover about a week of like, you know, actually maybe a little longer, 2 weeks of like the Romans and the Roman Empire. And then they skip right over to the European Dark Ages. And they pretend like nothing happened in between. You understand? Like they pretend that you go from like the 3rd century to the 14th century, and in between doesn't really matter, right? And actually, if you read, so I love history, and I read a ton on it from different perspectives, Muslim and non-Muslim. If you think of Western civilization as it is today, the origins of Western civilization actually come from what today is referred to as the Middle East. Like the Middle East were the Western civilization. So as we think of like societies today in Western Europe and America being super advanced, and we've got AI and shooting SpaceX things on the moon and Blue Origin and blah, blah, blah. All of that really started in what is today known as the Middle East. So the Middle East was the West of the past, right? Now, some of that stuff got adopted in the West in different ways, but the Middle East evolved in its own way. Right? Not in a bad way, but it just evolved in its own way. Now, the part that they don't cover is after Islam showed up, the golden ages of Islam were around because of knowledge and knowledge flourishing. And many of you that have studied anything on, you know, even rudimentary knowledge on Muslim history, you'll know some of this. The origins of algebra and optics and medicine and construction, and you know, even things like, you know, you know, the cleanliness of cities. Like, just to give you an idea. The Europeans in the 14th century, and this is pretty gross, like they go to the bathroom in buckets and throw it out on the street. In the Middle East, they actually had running systems of sewer in the houses. They would actually have clean water come in. They had systems by which clean water came in. If you ever visit Istanbul, or has anyone been to Istanbul? Has anyone been to Cairo? Who's been to? Okay. So if you go to Cairo, if you haven't been to these places, tell your parents to take you there next time. In Old Cairo, what's known as Old Cairo, you'll see the ancient I forgot the English name now. The thing where the water came up to the city.
Aqueduct.
The what? The aqueduct. Thank you. The aqueducts, right? Those are still there in Istanbul and Cairo. Some of these cities. That's what they used to actually clean the cities. Sewer would come in. So the Muslims and the Arabs had this. Europeans didn't. The street lamps were lit. So the streets were actually lit with oil lamps, which was considered very advanced. That the Europeans didn't have. The Europeans had darkness. That's why there's such a huge impact of the Andalusian civilization, Andalus in Spain, over Europe. And in essence, the centers of knowledge in Europe, which was Andalus, which is Spain today, southern Italy, so Sicily, if you look at the Italian map of Italy, it looks a bit like a boot, right? And Sicily's on the edge. That had a huge center of knowledge. So what is today southern Greece and northern Turkey had huge centers of knowledge. That's in essence what took over Europe, right? In fact, if anyone knows Paris, does anyone know Paris really well? Downtown Paris, Avenue Haussmann. You know what that is? By the opera? Dude, you just said you knew Paris really well. So the French, by the way, the Parisians themselves don't know that. Where does that name come from? Osman ibn Affan, radiallahu anhu, but they spell it Haussman. So the names get deformed, right? But actually all of those are their recognition of a time gone by when they knew that the benefits that they had in Europe, effectively what became the Western Golden Ages really started off with the Muslims and Arabs. They were the West of the time. So I'm telling you a story before we get into Khalid bin Walid. I have to describe how we got to this. So this is Khalid bin Walid going north. There's a story that happens before this. The story that I'm going to tell you is really, really important in human history, and it's 53 BC, okay? So it's not on the map, so just look at me for a second. So we've got a little thing called the Roman Empire going. Now, the Roman Empire came up and down, and they always had these nasty rebel groups in Germany that would fight them. They were like the terrorists of the time, the uncivilized guys that were just trying to kick them out of Germany. And they had a thing called the Senate, which you can think of like the Congress is today. It was the Roman Senate. The Roman Senate was ruled by very important people that took part in this, in essence became governors of the Senate. Well, one of the guys was named Gaius Caesar, otherwise known as Julius Caesar. Okay, we deformed the name, but that's actually his actual name. His family was going bankrupt. So he came from a good family, and he felt really bad that his family was going bankrupt. So he decides to take an army. Of course, in sort of human imagination, what happens when you feel like you're going poor? You go and you invade another country, because that's the right thing to do. You go pop into Venezuela, Iraq, or Afghanistan, and you decide to take over the resources. And the thinking was not that different at that time either. So he gathers up an army, and he goes and he invades France. At the time it was called Gaul, G-A-U-L, right? And he fights the Celts in Gaul. He kills a lot of them. He takes over all their riches, and he makes his family very rich again in Rome, right? So Julius Caesar, good to go. Now others, and he strikes a secret alliance with two other guys, a guy called Pompey and a guy called Crassus. Pompey, how many people here have heard of Pompey? Okay, Pompey's a famous guy. Crassus is the least famous guy, but he actually has a really important role to play. Crassus is the third guy. Crassus and Pompey hated each other. They hated each other, right? And Julius Caesar was really concerned the civil war is going to erupt because those two guys hated each other, right? We will get to Khalid ibn Walid, but just listen to what I've got to say. So he basically he promotes Crassus to get him out of Rome so that they don't have a civil war. And he says, hey, you go run Syria for us. Go run Syria, go run Turkey. All of that was part of the Roman Empire. We need somebody strong like you over there. And Crassus is over there, and he can't get, in his mind, he can't forget how rich Julius Caesar has become by invading Gaul. So he's like, it's my turn to go and do that. I'm controlling now this massive army. I've got Syria, I've got Turkey. Where am I going to go? Where would he go? East. East. So Egypt's already under their control. He goes east. And what's east of where they are? The Persians. The Persians.
Iran.
Iran. The Persians were the Middle East of the time. You understand? Like they were the West. The Persians were the Middle East of the time, right? And the Persians had an incredible empire. So massive empire. Think of it like East and West. West was Rome, Persians were East, but that's just geographically speaking. The Persian was probably more West than the East was, but it doesn't matter, right? And this is pre-Islam. This is actually even pre-Christianity. This is 53 BC, right? So Crassus gathers an army of 40,000 dudes, right? They're not just dudes. They're like, he's got mainly heavy infantry, and I'll talk about what the Romans had with heavy infantry. And he had roughly 10,000 cavalry. Half of them were medium, half of them were light. Like that's a massive army, right? And very advanced technologically. They were like the NATO of the time, right? So does anyone know how the Romans equipped the soldiers? Has anyone seen old Roman movies? They had a square shield. Why don't we do a reenactment? Let me get Ali, yes, you. And you get up. Let's get 4 Roman soldiers. Let's have you guys point to the audience with your shields in the front. So you can get up to, you can, yeah, we're gonna need some Persians in a second. So, yeah, we'll make him a Persian. No. I'll get Persians next. I'll get Persian. Okay. So they'd stand side by side like organized soldiers. Right hand is up. You are carrying a very big, massive rectangular shield. You understand? Now, in the other hand is a thing called a pilum. Does anyone know what a pilum is? It's a spear. So hold up your hand like you've got a spear in it. Okay, so it's a stabbing spear. So this line was, let's say, 5,000 long. It's a wall of shields. You got a stabbing spear, yeah, like that. Yes, like that, and like that.
I think we need Persians in front of us to see.
So they are now marching forward. That's called heavy infantry. They've got helmets. They're also carrying the swords. Does anyone know what the sword is called? It's called the gladius. And it's called the gladius because it's a short sword. Like it would come out at the end. So they would march, they would stab. Nothing is standing in their way because their shields are so big, completely made of metal. And then if they ever threw their techniques was to get close enough to throw the spear, and then if they had to break formation, the sword would come out. And it's a short stabbing sword, right? So these are the Romans, and they're tough dudes. They're like the toughest dudes on the planet. Do they look like tough dudes? Yeah. All right. So Crassus has got that. And then Crassus is going into Persia. Oh, we got another Persian that just joined. Good job. All right, so Crassus has got 40,000 of them. Actually, he's got 30,000 of them, and he's got 10,000 cavalry. And the Romans show up with 8,000 men on horseback, right? And they're archers. So we now need archers. So let's get Omar. Don't worry about the game. Get up. Okay. And you can be an archer too. You can join us. And you can be an archer as well. You can be an archer as well. You can be an archer as well. All right, so you guys are going to show up. I don't know, you're going to do like this thing or something, like pretend you're on a horse. Yeah. So show up like you're on your horses like that, right? And so there you go. So the Romans see them. There's only 8,000 of them. There's 40,000 of these guys, right? And the Romans are like, what a joke. So now what would the Persians do? Dude, you don't look like you're on a horse at all. Okay, so now pull up your arrow. So the Persians, point it up. Yeah, point it up. They were really good at doing this. And they would shoot from a distance. And as soon as they shoot, what would they do? Yeah, they'd get into a formation, not quite like that. Move forward. Okay, so they'd get into a formation they called testudo. Does anyone know what the testudo is? Testudo in Latin means a turtle. So what they would do is the front row would hold their shields like that. I need a back row person. Can you be a back row person? I'll be a back row person with you. So the back row of the Roman line would carry their shields on top, right? So you've got shields in the front, shields on top. These guys are fighting arrows. What's happening to the arrows? They're bouncing off the shields. So the Romans are like, dude, we got this. You understand? Now also understand the mindset. I'm saying this to everyone. You don't look like you're doing anything. What's wrong with you? All right. You want to be a camel? so because they have camels, we're gonna need some camels. So the Romans are like, we've got this. Like the arrows are bouncing off of our shields. Nothing is happening to us. There's 40,000 of us. There's 8,000 of those guys. What a bunch of losers. You understand? And there's also this mindset of superiority. That's really important to understand. Like, we're superior because we're Roman, right? Okay. So you guys start to march forward, serious march forward. And when they march forward, you guys are going to retreat with your horses, because if you get caught, by the time you're going to get killed. And they fire again, get into a testudo again, nothing happens again. You understand? And they basically climb over a hill. Let's just pretend that wall behind you, don't have to climb anywhere. Climb over the hill, and they disappear from sight. In the meanwhile, our brave Roman soldiers, what are they doing? They're what?
Marching.
They're marching up the hill because they're gonna get these guys, and those guys don't have a chance. Got it? Yeah. All right. So retreat a little bit. Okay. Now they're gonna play a different role. So when they get to the top of the hill and they start to go down, they find that unbeknownst to them, the Persian general has hidden something that the Romans have never seen before, and it's called a cataphract. Okay, the cataphracts. The Europeans didn't get cataphracts until about 7 centuries later, but the Persians actually come up with that invention. So a cataphract is a horseman that's completely covered in iron, with the horse and the horseman covered in iron with a massive spear on the front. So now I need you guys to convert into cataphracts. Okay? So, yeah, like that. Like now, but now you're on a horse. Yeah. Oh my, work with me, man. Okay. All right. So these guys are now rushing down the hill. They're gaining momentum, and now these cataphracts charge up the hill, and they mow them down. All right. So they, all right. Come back. All right. This is a reenactment. Nobody has to get hurt, right, or get skewered or whatever. So these cataphract guys are destroying the Romans. They're just cutting through them like butter, right? Like so. And the Romans are blown away. Actually, two things happen. Not only are these guys cutting through them like butter, but the horse archers do something else that I forgot to say as they're retreating, which is retreat, horse archers. So turn around on your horses, go back that way. Okay. Turn around. There you go. See what he just did? Do exactly what he did. Show them. Clearly, you've done this before. Yeah. They fire arrows as they're retreating from behind their backs. The Romans had never seen that before. So the Romans start to get major losses. You understand? So they take losses on the retreat of the archers, and now they're being cut to bits by these cataphracts. And Crassus is in a panic. And his son is at the top of the hill. So his son is at the top of the hill. He's part of the battle. Crassus on the other side. And these Roman soldiers, and the Roman soldiers, by the way, as they go down the hill, they can't hold their momentum. Like they can't, like they're like, slow down. And they're going through them. And all the cataphracts did was they went up the hill like a lawnmower. And then they come back and go down the hill, and then go back up the hill and go back down the hill. And then they notice that there's a dude on top of the hill who's the son of Crassus. So they get him, they cut his head off, and they put it on a spike to show the father that he's about to lose the battle. Okay? You guys can sit down, man. You did a great job. So the only thing that saves the Romans on the first day. Now the Romans are the Persians are outnumbered 5-1, 10-1, and they wipe out 10,000 men on the first day. They take very, very few casualties. They take about 300 casualties, including the son of Crassus himself. And the next day, so the only thing that stops the battle is what? What would stop the battle at the end of the day? Nighttime. Yeah. So there was an understanding that we don't fight at night. So when it's nighttime, like, okay, guys, let's take a break. You go to your camp, we'll go to our camp, taking care of the wounded, making dinner, etc., etc. The next day they show up, and the Roman general comes out. So the Roman general is Crassus, and the Persian general comes out, and he wants to speak. Well, do you know what they called it? Even in the U.S. in the Civil War, they had a name for it. Parley. They wanted to parley. What does that mean?
It's French.
It's French for speak. Let's talk. So in other words, two fighting parties are now going to talk. So they now meet in the front, and let me get a Roman guy, let me get a Persian guy. So two guys, doesn't matter. Dude, it's very simple. Okay, so the Persian says to the Roman, draw a line in the middle, where you're standing with your little stick, and say, this is the Euphrates River.
This is the Euphrates.
Euphrates River is roughly here on the map. This is the Euphrates River. So he says to him, this, so he draws a line, is the border. He says, this is Rome, this is Persia. Crassus loses it. He's like, no. And he goes back to battle. All right, sit down. So the same thing happens on the second day. By the end of the second day, 20,000 Romans have been killed. The Romans actually at one point in time, they're getting so hammered by the Persians, by the arrows. Sorry about that. They get so hammered by the Persians. Remember, there's only 8,000 of these horsemen. But what they didn't realize is they brought camels. That's the role that I thought Omar was going to play. The supply camels. They brought 1,000 supply camels, and they had 1,000 arrows in each of the supply camels. You understand? So they're keeping they've got 1 million arrows. They could literally sit and bombard the Romans forever. You understand? And they're finishing them off. The Romans at one point in time, one of the sub-generals and commanders says, let's wait until they run out of ammunition. They were never going to run out of ammunition. But you already know that that's a bad strategy when an army says, let's just wait until they run out of ammunition. You understand that? Okay. So the Romans are effectively completely defeated. 20,000 of them have been killed. Crassus himself gets caught. And the Persian doctors are keeping him alive. They're tending to his wounds and they're keeping him alive. And the next day, the Persian emperor comes to meet Crassus the general, right? Not just the general, but the actual Persian emperor comes to meet him. And the Persian emperor says to him, you're our guest in Persia, and you came for gold. So we'll make sure that you get some gold before you go. And they open up his mouth, and they get a pot of molten gold, and they pour it down his throat. That event, Battle of Karhe, 53 BC, starts roughly an 800-year war between the two superpowers, the Sassanid Empire and the Eastern Byzantine Empire. You understand? They're two huge superpowers. And sometimes they won, sometimes they won, sometimes they won. Generally, by the way, the Persians had the upper hand. The only thing that the Romans, well, not the only thing, but what the Romans were good at, so the Persians, by the way, they'd go into invade Turkey, they go into Syria, they go into Palestine. Many times that's where they actually got rid of and destroyed the temple. This is actually during that time. We went through that with the story of Isa. They go into Egypt. But how the Romans would get them back is the Romans had a very powerful navy in the Mediterranean. The Persians didn't. So the Romans would go around them with the navy, land in Syria, attack them from behind, right? But it was always back and forth. That situation existed up until the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The two superpowers fight. Enter Khalid ibn Walid. The first time he shows up on the scene, we are here, roughly. So, just explain what you're looking at. This is the Arabian Sea, or the Persian Sea, depending on where you're from. This is Persia, or today, modern-day Iran. This is the Euphrates River, so this would roughly be Iraq. All of this down here would be Saudi, and Palestine is somewhere up here north. So Turkey, by the way, this city, Karhe, is southern Turkey today. It's extreme north of Syria or southern Turkey. That's the city where this battle occurs. So Turkey is this way, Syria is this way, Palestine, Egypt is that way, and this is where the Khilafah was. But before the Khilafah, there was the Battle of Mu'tah. So I just want to get to the Battle of Mu'tah first. So Khalid ibn Walid had just become a Muslim. He, in essence, been a Muslim for, some people say a month, some people say 6 weeks. And he joins the army the Prophet ﷺ is sending against the Ghassasina in the north because they had killed a messenger of the Prophet ﷺ, and messengers were never to be killed. So the Prophet sends an ambassador, and the king of the Ghassasina kills them on a personal level. So the Prophet now sends an army. And by the way, this was after also the the peace treaty with the Quraysh, so his back is covered, and he sends the army, and the army is led by three men. Who are they? Who's the first one? Abdurrahman ibn Rawaha was actually the third. So yes, he was there. Who else? Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. What was he known as? What was his relationship to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Quran is revealed because of this. His adopted son. People spoke about his adopted son until which surah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there are no adopted sons. Surah Al-Ahzab. ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجال. Okay, so Zayd ibn Thabit was known as Zayd ibn Muhammad for a very long time, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, the way you treat, what do we call them nowadays in English? Orphans. No, not just the orphans, but like when you care for a child. No? Yeah. What's the English word? Adoption. Like the way Arabs used to do adoption is not halal in Islam. Like the child has to keep their identity, right? And so Zayd ibn Thabit was general number one. Yes?
Do you mean Zayd ibn Haritha?
Zayd ibn Haritha, right? And then after that was Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, who's the cousin of the Prophet. And then after that was Ibn Rawh, right? Okay. So 3 generals get killed, and then the Prophet ﷺ says, pick whoever you want after that. The Romans decide that these Arabs are not important enough. Like they're like, the Ghassasina will take care of them. They're effectively agents of the Romans. So this is now happening in southern Jordan, right? Like they're just not important enough. Like we've never known them to be fighters. They don't have technology. They don't have weapons. They don't have science like we have. We'll just send the Ghassasina. So they were the Christian Arabs of Jordan. We'll back them up by 20, 30,000 real Roman soldiers, so like the NATO of the world at the time, and we'll wipe them out. Now they show up with 4,000 men, and general number 1 gets killed, general number 2 gets killed, general number 3 gets killed. The army's generally in bad shape. The Muslim army is generally in bad shape. At the end of the killing, the Prophet ﷺ says, if of the three of them die, then pick whoever you feel is most suitable. He doesn't say Khalid ibn al-Walid specifically, right? Khalid ibn al-Walid is a new convert by today's speak, right? So they turn around, they're like, who do we make the general? They're like, well, Khalid ibn al-Walid, pick him. He's like the most experienced in terms of fighting. How do they know that? He fought against them in Uhud, right? He used to command the right wing of the cavalry for the Quraysh. So that was his job. Like he was the general of the Quraysh that controlled the right wing of the cavalry. Who controlled the left wing? Akrimah ibn Abi Jahl, mashallah alayk. Akrimah, right? So Abi Jahl, like that, Abi Jahl, his son Akrimah was the one that controlled the left wing of the army, who by the way later on becomes Muslim, and he is the one that dies a shaheed in which battle? Yarmouk. Right? Akrimah ibn Abi Jahl. So they were best friends, by the way. But Akrimah had not become a Muslim yet. In fact, when the Muslims enter Mecca, he escapes, thinking that the Prophet's going to kill him if he finds him. Right? Okay. So Khalid, they're like, he is the most experienced, have him run the army. And he does this incredible tactic. Like he knows there's no way they're going to win. But he does this amazing thing where, it's a hilly area, so southern Jordan, northern Arabia. He starts to maneuver soldiers in the back and have them show up and then give them a different flag as they show up. So the Romans are looking on the other side going, wait, is that just a new division that came in? And then he get them to go to the back again from the other side, give them a different flag and have them pop up again. And he was fighting a defensive war. So he wasn't engaging in attack, but he was fighting a defensive war. Then what he does at night is he'd have each soldier light up 10 different campfires and then walk around it. And so the Romans were like, where'd they get so many guys? Because like the fire was an indication of how many people are on the other side. Right. The Romans were like, where all these guys come from, right? And then he does a brilliant military strategy that's still taught in advanced military schools today as far as retreat is concerned, which is you attack really hard and then you retreat, right? And when they retreated, so by the way, the Prophet ﷺ is now in Medina, and if you know your seerah well, he's now explaining to the Sahaba what's going on, blow fight blow in the battle. This is like the, like today, like this is where they are. Like the Prophet ﷺ is giving them that information, and when they go back to Medina, many of the Muslims in Medina are upset, and they say, "Oh, you guys escaped the battle." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "No, they're the winners. They're not the losers. They're the winners." Right? Okay. So that's where he gets his claim to fame. That's where he pops up on the board, so to speak. So he participates in other things after that. After the death of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu takes on the Khilafah of the Ummah. And by the way, first time ever in human history that someone takes over, for example, after the Prophet ﷺ, and doesn't call himself what? King or emperor. First time in human history. Just like it was the first time, so I'm teaching this in another class, I think we talked about this last time, the khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ in khutbah al-wada' in Hajj, khutbah al-Hajj the Prophet ﷺ gave, by most accounts he gave 3 khutbahs, right, on three different days. But the things that he said on that day had never, ever, ever been said in human history before. No one had ever said that. No one had spoken about the equality of man, or taking care of the women, or the rights of, no one had spoken about that before, right? So this is all new. This is all brand new. And for the first time ever, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, roughly 40-50%, especially of Western Arabia, is controlled by one entity, which is the Muslims. So that's the legacy, part of the legacy that the Prophet leaves behind. And also no more shirk in Arabia. No more shirk. That's by command, right? In Hajjat al-Wada', that no more shirk in Arabia, right? Okay. So after he dies, Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he takes on the Khilafah, and he's called the leader of the believers. Amir al-Mu'mineen. He doesn't take on the title of king or emperor. That had never been happened before, ever, right? So then we have a thing called Hurub al-Ridda, where he sends 2 armies, one to the south and one to the east. Khalid ibn Walid is the one leading the one to the east. We're not going to get into any of the details now, but it finishes off the climax of Hurub al-Ridda is which battle? Yamama, right? Yamama had a guy called Musaylim al-Kadhab, and he claimed to be the actual messenger, the actual prophet. By the way, Musaylima was one of the guys that went to the Prophet ﷺ in the 9th year of Hijrah with the Aam al-Wufud, the year of delegations, to say he accepts Islam. By the way, he enters the masjid, like if you read the books of Sirah, he's being carried on the shoulders of a bunch of other dudes because he's the king of that tribe, and they're like, air conditioning him as they go along. And then he tries to negotiate with the Prophet. So first he tells them, you run the big cities, I'll run the outskirts. And the Prophet ﷺ says no. He says, okay, well, I'll tell you what, you run everything, but I take over after you die. He says no. That's not how it works. And then the Prophet ﷺ says he had a small stick with him. He said, I wouldn't give you anything. I wouldn't even give you the small stick. I wouldn't even leave this behind for you, right? So he was already, a hypocrite that was turning just for that basis. He'd be sending poetry saying that this is like Quran and stuff. Anyway, it ends up with the Musaylim al-Kadhab, the Battle of Yamama, and that's Khalid bin Walid heading east. And Khalid bin Walid then continues to head east until he gets to what is today very south of Iraq. The Persians now start to pay attention to these Muslims. By the way, they had a very low point of view of them. Again, the Arabs were like the scum of the earth, no technology, no wealth. But by the way, not even human population. Like, understand that these civilizations, like in Egypt and in Iraq and in Rome, they grew up around rivers. Like, they could sustain scale-based agriculture. The Arabs didn't have any of that. Even the societies of the Arabs, the whole Madani society at the time of Uhud, by most accounts, was 3,000 people total, right? So very small community. So they're paying them minor attention. They're like, well, maybe we should go and meet this Khalid bin Walid guy. Like, he's coming with an army. He's pretending to be something. So that's the first encounter that they have down here in a city called Khuzama. And the the Persians show up. I'll go through this really quickly, and then I know we've been at this for a while, and you guys have been acting really hard. So they send an army, and they send a general to lead the army, and they chain the Roman soldiers. Now, they chain them for a reason. They chain them to have a psychological impact on the cowardly Arabs, because they're telling them that soldiers are not going to run away. That's one. But two, because the Arabs had very fast horses, and having the chains run across the lines of the Persian soldiers meant that the horses could never penetrate the lines. So it's both a system of attack and defense. At the time, and I think you all know this, but the Arabs prided themselves in what? What was their miracle before Quran was revealed? Sorry? Poetry. So before a battle, two tribes would show up, and they'd have their poets, and their poets would literally improv a poem. You understand? You know how have comedian improvs today? They did that, but they did that with poetry. So they were very strong at their language. So a dude gets up, and he'd improv the other tribe, and then the other tribe would get up and improv that poet, and they go back and forth a few times. If they felt like they were tied, or they didn't score a penalty or whatever, for argument's sake, then they wouldn't have the battle, right? One tribe would actually, okay, your poet wins, all right, we'll call it a day. You understand? But if they weren't satisfied, then they'd go to battle, right? So the Arabs do this. So the poet gets up and he starts to say Arabic poetry against the Persians. The Persians understand nothing of the poetry. Like, what a waste of time this is. Let's go fight these guys, right? So then habit number 2 was what? So the poetry was number 1. What was habit number 2? Tradition number, the what? The duel. Perfect. And this happened in every battle. This happened in Badr, this happened in Uhud, right? It happened in every battle. And so they're like, you bring your hero, we bring our hero, or 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, like whatever kind of martial arts setup you want to have. So Khalid bin Walid says, beautiful, I'm the hero of the Muslims. Why was that so unconventional? Because he's a general. The general never steps up. You understand? Like the master of the samurai thing. He's like, no, take my best student. There, take this guy. Take that. You know what I mean? Like, they're the ones that are going to represent the dojo. Like, I'm not going to be fighting. I'll come next, right? So now the Persians, and if you read the history books, it's amazing because this Persian soldiers literally don't know what to do. They look at their general, they're like, what would you like to do, sire? Like, what would you? So he's like, well, no, I'll go. That fight was over in 30 seconds. It's 30 seconds, like the guy was killed. So already there's a huge impact. The leader is gone. The Muslims fight. The others panic. The army collapses. Like, there's a lot of detail. If you guys want to go through it at some point in time, because I love military tactics. That war was over pretty quickly, and the Persians were wiped out. So Khalid bin Walid now starts to go north, and he meets these guys here. That's kind of the next set of battles. And the Persians are now sending bigger armies. By the way, he had a total of 18,000 men. By the very end, when he's fighting up here, he has 15,000. He has 15,000 against a combined Roman-Persian army of 200,000. And we'll get to how that happens in a second, because the two of them were at war. But he starts to march north, and this is along the lines of the Euphrates, right? So the Persians send another contingency, a bigger army. By the time, by the way, he gets to the third battle, the general already knows the tactics, that he's going to challenge him and he's going to be their hero. So he buries 13 of his men underground with straw so they could breathe. And they're like, when we get here and he challenges me, you guys jump out and you fight. right? And the cousin of Khalid ibn Walid, who was also on the Muslim side, notices this. So he comes up and he's like, that's not fair. He pairs up with Sayyid Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu. They fight off the 13 guys and they finish all 13 guys off. And then the battle starts and the Persians are smashed again, right? So that's that battle. Every battle had a slightly different tactic. And subhanAllah, I mean, you could see, we could spend hours talking about this, reflections of ayat of the Quran, reflections of dua of the Prophet ﷺ. But he defeats them until he gets to Hira. By the time he gets to Hira now, the emperor himself is involved. They're like, you guys can't run this. I'm going to do this myself. So I'm going to create an army of 60,000 men in 3 contingencies. Now, when you create an army that big, they don't all live in the same place. You understand? Like the Persian Empire runs from this border all the way to China. Like he's going to get people from here, people from here, people from there, and they don't all move at the same time. So those people are moving, and Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid does something which is probably not doable today, even by modern military standards. So let's pretend the same group of Roman brave soldiers that we had here say, you guys all have cars, right? The Roman soldiers, okay. So let's say we told them, you're gonna drive your car straight to DC from here, and you're not gonna stop. You can use your GPS, so go non-stop from here to DC, and I want you all to be there at 2 a.m., what day are we today, on Tuesday? 2 a.m. on Saturday morning. Do you guys think you could do it? Like we're gonna meet at the Lincoln Memorial, 2 a.m. Saturday morning, whatever cars you may be driving, but you have to take 3 different routes, 4 different routes. Like you can't all follow each other. Like that's not permitted. Like you gotta, if you take I-90, somebody else gotta take like I-5 and then kind of cross, whatever, right? That's what Khalid ibn Walid does. So he breaks up his army. So he's now losing men. He's got 15,000 left. He now starts to break up his army in contingencies of 5,000. And he goes, be here. So he knows roughly where the 20,000 are moving from. He does some kind of algebraic genius, mashallah, mental math that says, by the time this army moves, they're gonna be over here at 2 a.m. on Saturday. I'm gonna go north. You go this way, you go this way, that way. And we are all gonna arrive on the exact same day and we'll find the Persians right there. What I just described happened 3 times in a row, and that's how they got rid of the 60,000. They literally got rid of they killed 60,000 Persian soldiers, and every single time he'd be exactly right about where to meet. He's like, this is where they're gonna be, and they didn't move together so that they'd be faster and they'd be quieter and there'd be some stealth involved, but they would typically show up at night when the Persians were asleep, so they just showed up, right? By the time all of that is done, forget about some of these details here, by the time he gets to Firaz, what's interesting about this city?
It's on the border.
It's on the border. The Romans and the Persians have been fighting for almost 8 centuries. And they're like, you're not the problem. We don't want to fight you anymore. Remember the situation with Crassus that happened 780 years ago? Like, these guys are the problem. So we better ally up and fight these Arab guys as they're moving north, because they're really the enemy. We're not the enemy. And they gather a joint, as they said, look, we agree. So they gather an army of 200,000 men, and Sayyid Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu anhu, he is on the east side of the Farat, and they're on the west side. And there's 2 situations going on in the city. One is there's a massive bridge, and the other is there is land in the river where an army can reasonably cross over the land to get to the other side, right? Like you can create enough connections where you can hop and skip from one piece of land to the other until you get to the other side, and the army's fairly safe. And because Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid is both a genius and a gentleman, he backs up. He's like, I'll give you guys space, no worries. So he backs up, he moves one army upstream, one army downstream, and one army he pushes back. He's like, you guys stay hidden, right? So again, a third. These guys start to cross. So some of them cross the bridge, some of them cross the river, and they're gathering on the eastern flank of the Euphrates. And when there's about 50,000 of them on the other side of the Euphrates, so there's still 150,000 on the other side, he moves the ones on the eastern flank, on the upper and the lower parts of the river, to smash the 2 sides of the army. Remember, there's only 5,000, and he effectively has a long line of men, similar to our brave Roman soldiers here and our Persian Roman soldiers, that are holding them together. And then he commands the division in the back to attack in the front. And then all they do is he's like attack and retreat, attack and retreat. He's smashing into the body of the 50,000 men. So what is he actually doing? He's compressing the Romans into one area. So they're held from north and south, and these guys are smashing into them left and right. Eventually, the Romans are so compressed, the Romans and the Persians are so compressed, they can't move. You understand? Like the men are literally tied up. The historians will tell you that it was so bad for them that they heard bones actually being crushed, the bones of the soldiers being crushed with the Persians and the Romans. By the way, there's there in the Kathir and others, they'll tell you that Sayyidina Khalid al-Walid at that time, he expected to absolutely be shaheed, like he's not going to survive this battle. So he makes a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he makes a nadhr. If I win this, if I survive this, I'm going to go to Hajj. Okay? So that's the nadhr that he makes. So this army keeps attacking, and essentially, the way they fought or whatever, the Romans and the Persians panic, and they turn back to where?
The river?
To the river, and they end up drowning or being flooded or whatever, and they lose that battle completely. All the men essentially disappear, right? Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid takes 3 of his fastest horsemen, and he goes to Hajj. Now there's a discrepancy on who was the Khalifa at the time, whether it was Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu or Umar ibn Khattab. I personally lean toward Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. And he goes and he makes the Hajj very quickly. So he does, what kind of Hajj does he do? Huh? Ifrad? We said Ifrad. Yeah, that's exactly right. So 3 types of Hajj, what are they? Tamattu? Qiran? Ifrad. Okay, so what is the difference? Tamattu, you go and you make Umrah, take off, take a shower, chill out, eat burgers, whatever, and then you go and you put your ihram on again and you do your Hajj. That's Tamattu. Qiran is what? That's what the Prophet ﷺ did. Which is, he kept it on the whole time, and he advises the Ummah, he says, if I were to redo it, I wouldn't actually do it. And he actually commands the Sahaba that have not taken their Hajj to break their ihram. So that's the second type. Qiran, that's Qiran. Ifrad is literally when you parachute into Arafah. Like you show up in Arafah. You do the standing of Arafah and then you go back. That's it. That is like Ifrad is the fastest Hajj. So he does that. However, he gets cited. And the news gets to the Khalifa. Right? And the Khalifa now reprimands. They're like, dude, you didn't take permission. Like, what the heck are you doing? Like, it was clear he wasn't abandoning the army. Like, he wasn't retreating. He was doing it out of religious intention, right? So he let him go. But he was discovered. His Hajj was discovered, and it wasn't publicly announced. Like, there was no official permission. Hey, can I go to Hajj? Like, he didn't do any of that, right? He zipped down, he zipped back up, but he was caught. Like, they knew who he was, and the Khalifa found out. There's more to the story, and I'm not even going into any of the details. So, is this interesting? This is completely different to, like, honestly, I was going to cover something else that was pretty cool because it had cars and things, and it's mansions, and I decided, not to do that. Maybe we'll do that next time.
This is interesting.
It's interesting, you like it? Okay. And we can go into a lot more detail on the battles, I just never know how deep you guys want to go. Like, I already think we overdid it with the Romans and the Thailands and all that. Maybe we'll talk about what the Muslims were wearing. But I'm not going to be here for the next 2 weeks, I think. Yes?
One small footnote,
Yes.
not related to your map, Brother Allah. But I found it fascinating. In Wisconsin, the archaeological dig recently uncovered artifacts of a city 12,000 years old
Oh,
from the native
yeah.
indigenous people. So that came to my mind when you mentioned that Western historians conveniently drop out whole centuries of history of mankind because it's convenient to their narrative.
Spot on. I love it.
The tribe, sorry, was something like Hattab.
Okay.
Hattab,
Yeah.
an Indian tribe.
When we think about the way history is told in the West, like for example, Spain discovered America, right? Like they came into the West Indies, and it was Isabella at the time that, by the way, just gone and murdered a whole bunch of Muslims, and the leader of the Navy was actually a Muslim guy. But let's forget all those facts. They discovered. I'm like, but people lived there already. What exactly did they discover? You mean the Europeans discovered America? So. if you actually double click, especially in as far as like U.S. history is concerned, but like when we talk about people here, like people lived here and they were fine. And by the way, they didn't just live here, meaning North America. They lived in Central America. They lived in Mexico. They lived all the way in South America. The Europeans are the ones that came over and started to take it over for the control of gold and money and wealth, and and essentially tried to eradicate many of these tribes. So whenever we are speaking about white history in America, we're actually talking about European history. Today I was reading a paper that just fascinated me. Has anyone heard about this lady? I don't know if she published her book or not. There's a conference call that I joined a couple days ago. So she's a law professor at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's an African American. And she went back and forth on whether or not to write this book. But here's what the book is about. Let me just net it out for you. The book is about, can African Americans get compensation for the way they've been treated and the lands that have been taken away from them from the U.S. Her research basically shows that the U.S. government paid the native tribes when lands were taken, and paid the Italians for lynching in their communities in the early 18th and 19th century. She's like, wait a minute. So if the US government was able to pay those two, there's others by the way, but like she pulls up those two in particular. What about the African Americans that lived here for such a long time? How can we regain that? And then she goes and she rebuilds. That takes just when she started the narrative, I'm like, I already feel overburdened. Like I feel tired. Just when she started, I was like, I feel exhausted now. And she's like, that's how I felt. And then I would remember my mother. She would have slapped me across the stage. She said, get going, girl, and close that and finish your research. But that's a book that's coming out, and it's a fascinating thing when history is told that way. Like, and we, to be honest, we don't do enough work to educate ourselves and educate our children on what really happened. When you look at even some, we talk about diversity and inclusion. The Jewish populations of Europe, their golden ages were when the Muslims were there. The Christians in Spain and Sicily and, as I said, northern Turkey and so forth, their golden ages when the Muslims were there. There was never, because in our deen, there's no thing about forced conversion. We don't have that. On the other hand, when the Spanish started to go back, what they call the Reconquista in their own history. So by the way, if you read Spanish curriculum books of schools, they cover the early part of Spanish history. So they had a bunch of tribes there called the Visigoths. The Visigoths essentially were fighting the Romans, and the Romans would go and destroy them, took over Spain and built a whole bunch of temples to the Roman gods in Spain. But the Visigoths were the tribes that lived there at the time. And then they skip over 800 years of Spanish history, and then they literally cover that in 2 chapters, and then they cover Isabella and Ferdinand starting about the 15th century for the rest of the book. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't, and the problem there is that they look at the Muslims as invaders when the Muslims are actually Spanish people. When you look at Spanish history today, many of the people coming back into Islam are called the Moriscos. The Moriscos are actually Spanish people that are rediscovering their roots, right? So they're white Spaniards that suddenly go, oh, my great-grandfather used to do this thing. The way you pray. And suddenly they're like, let me look into that. And remember that in Spain, again, back to your thing about the recognition of Western civilization, Spain didn't officially acknowledge any other religion except for Catholicism until 1973. 1973. So they didn't, they were like, there's nothing. There's no Protestants, there's no Muslims, there's no Jews, there's nothing but Catholicism. There's nothing but Catholicism. If you ever go and visit Cordoba, for example, the Masjid of Cordoba, right?
Yes.
When you go in, if they notice you're a Muslim and the guards watching you, they'll say, don't pray.
Don't play here.
It's not a masjid, don't pray. You go inside and the masjid is beautiful. Like you just want to offer 2 rakat anyway. Like just stand there and like pray anyway you want, right? Like the ugliest part of the masjid, and I hate to say this, is the chapel that they built right in the middle. Completely out of place. Like it's an incredible, beautiful piece of architecture. If you haven't seen it, go online and look at it. There's YouTube videos that will show you a tour of the inside. And then right in the middle of this masjid, they built a church. It doesn't take the whole masjid, it's like right in the middle. can you imagine like where you guys are sitting? Like you come and you build a little chapel with an organ, and like it's so out of place, right? SubhanAllah. Anyway, let's make it on, inshallah. And we'll be here for 2 weeks. Did I tell you guys that? So, okay. So Omar, you're gonna take over. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الاحياء والاموات انك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الابرار ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم اشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين